My name is Scott Fowler, and I'm currently on the board of the Monroe Historical Society. But I got my connections with LeSourdsville Lake and Americana back in the late 70s, early 80s, and worked in foods.
What inspired you to create the two books that you created about LeSourdsville and Americana?
That started on my last season at Americana in the late 80s. I worked in the main restaurant right off the entrance, and that was a two-story building, and they used the attic to store catering supplies. And so during our downtimes, we'd have to roll silverware and put them in bins. And since I was usually the only male on duty, I would get the job of hauling them up the steps. Well, these steps were, they weren't the code, they were very narrow. And when you had big feet, that was not good. So once I got upstairs, I'd kind of stay up there a little bit. So I got to appreciate the architecture of the building and the beams and how they were put together, and wanted to know more about that history. And that, make a long story short, it snowballed into a complete history of the park. And eventually collecting photos and stories, and that's where the book came from.
So, what was the response when you released these books?
Surprisingly, very well. People have a very um, deep, what's the word I'm looking for? Affliction for the park. Um, they remember their first date, where they met their spouse, their first job. And so there's a lot of good memories that this park still has, even though it's been gone since 2002.
What made you want to apply and work at the park?
Money. I had really no aspirations. My mom said, "Why don't you get work out at LeSourdsville?" And I said, "Okay." And my first year there was I wouldn't call it a disaster, but I shouldn't have stayed. I cut my hand open one time preparing a sandwich on all day, one of the Good Sam hospital days where they had nurses and staff there, and sliced the hand open, and nurse was right there. She was my customer. She came around and helped, and it was great.
Were you somebody who frequented the park before you'd worked there at all?
I think I had gone there maybe once or twice with my parents, but not really familiar with it.
So when you're at the park, you're looking around. I mean, what caught your eye? What kept you there?
Wow, that's a good question. I think basically it turned out to be the atmosphere. It was something that you couldn't get. I had worked at Kroger too, and Kroger was good to work for, but it didn't have that atmosphere, fun atmosphere, family atmosphere, something different every day type thing. And Swordsville definitely offered that.
What were some of the more memorable events that happened while you worked there?
Besides slicing my hand open, um, well, like I said, I worked in the main restaurant there off the entrance, and adjacent to that restaurant was a green room. So when they would have the acts come in, musical acts come in, they would usually take them to the green room, and then we'd provide them food, drinks, whatever. And so, of all the acts that came through, you know how many I actually met? Zero. They kept them pretty private from the public, but you knew they were over there.
What do you think about how history looks on the park now?
I think it depends on the perception. Some people look at it and they'll say, "Oh, Kings Island killed Americana," and that's not true. Americana survived well after Kings Island came around, and actually both parks kind of operated well with each other. Coney Island was also a major competitor in the area, and after Coney bought Americana there in 80 or in 96, um, Coney was going to have a North Park, which was Americana, and a South Park, and try and get a lot of the picnic business, which is what really keeps these parks alive, and kind of take it from Kings Island, but it didn't turn out that way.
Were there any rides that you like to ride there, or any parts of the park that were your favorite when you were, you know, maybe on break or something like that that you would wander to, or anything?
Probably the Screechin Eagle roller coaster has to be, I think it's everybody's favorite, but it contributed to my back issues today. And, but it was fun and I'd do it all over again. But that was probably the best one.
What was your first? Do you remember the first time that you walked into the park? What was your thought?
What am I doing here? That was the time I remember is my first day at work. And they told me how to, I worked back in Tombstone territory at the time, and they told me how to get back there. And not knowing really the layout of the park or anything, I really felt lost. And then by the time I got back there, it was swamped. And it was like training on fire. And it was interesting.
Do you have any coworkers or people that you were um, around during that time that you still keep in touch with? You guys talk about the park and everything?
I do. One person is Alfred Freeman, who, boy, he's got story after story about the park. And still stay in contact with him. And he was helpful when I was doing the books and kind of helped me with some of the coaster information because he used to be a coaster operator and did some of the maintenance on it. And then there's Elsa, who I worked with my first year there. She still lives in town, and we kind of communicate back and forth. And there's Kim, and I think that's about it initially.
Um, we've got all this great memorabilia in this room. How did all this come to be here at the museum?
Well, the Monroe Historical Society is the home of the only exhibit dedicated to LeSourdsville Lake and Americana. And this came to be mainly because of my obsession with the park after I left. I had started purchasing memorabilia and keeping what I had, and anytime I come across something, I would try and get it, and not really knowing what to do with it. So the opportunity came where I could donate it to the Monroe Historical Society. And so they took it, put it in storage, and I never heard anything after that. Well, years down the road, I was asked to serve on the board. And I thought, oh, what a great opportunity, do something different. And I had been serving on the board for the Fairfield Historical Society. So when I came on the board here, they said, oh, by the way, we have an opening for a curator, and you would be perfect for it because you have some experience. And I said, oh, okay. And they said, your first assignment is to create a Americana LeSourdsville Lake exhibit from scratch. And here's your room, and you can use whatever supplies you need. Just don't go over budget. And I said, great, what's my budget? And they said, 0. So this has become a one of the more popular spots for when we have open houses first Saturday of each month. Almost everybody comes into this room, and some people only come to this room. They don't care about the rest of the museum.
So, what was your normal schedule, like your routine as you worked there?
I wouldn't say a routine, as long as I got there on time, clocked in, and sometimes it was boring, and you'd be kind of sitting there, supposed to be cleaning, but sitting there kind of killing time. And other days you would just be swamped and no time to sit down, and your back and knees and hands, and you're just sore. So it just depends on the day.
Did you have any regulars that you recognized all the time? And you're like, oh, here comes so and so, or
Actually, there was one gentleman when I worked back in Tombstone, my first year there. His name was Bubblegum Bob, and he would be there on the weekends managing the band. And I put that in air quotes because he had nothing to do with these bands. He was just a 80-year-old groupie. but he was funny. But he would come in and promote the bands and say, "You guys gotta come over and see them," and they're playing this and playing that, and he probably would have made a great promoter, but never did find out who he was in real life.
When you worked there, what was the most popular thing in the park?
You mean attraction wise?
Yes.
It would have to be the Screechin' Eagle roller coaster by far. I'm not even sure what would be second. Although in '84, they did add the Raging Thunder log flume. And that log flume became nationally known as a favorite. So that would probably have to be number two.
I can remember the log flume pretty clear.
They promised you would get wet, but you know why? Because they had water running from the top of the opening of the tunnel down. So yeah, you were going to get wet.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Yeah, it was a good concept.
So when they closed everything down, do you know where anything ended up?
Yes and no. When the park closed down for good in 2002, it was privately owned by an individual who also owned the trailer sales next door in the parking lot, actually, at the park. And he kept a lot of items. Some were sold and either ended up on eBay or some of the rides ended up at the park. Coney purchased 2 or 3 rides. Stricker's Grove ended up with a couple rides. And that's about it there.
So you know if any of them are still in operation?
The rides, yeah, Stricker's Grove still operates the Electric Rainbow, which was the circular ride that kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Gravity defying ride. And they also have a swinging ship, which Americana bought, I think, a couple years before they went out for good.
So any idea about the Serpent or any of the other?
Serpent ended up being sold to a amusement park up in Michigan. It has since been sold again to an amusement park, I think, in New York.
And any other like attractions or anything that were in there that you know landed anywhere?
Well, some are probably in the dump next door to the park if we ever dig down far enough. There's some artifacts back there, but city probably doesn't want anybody digging back there. But I think there's some good stuff back there. Oh, and then Coney Island had purchased a couple of the rides, but we don't know once Coney closed where those rides went.
What was the most popular thing on the menu?
It's got to be, without a doubt, fried chicken. When Howard Berney owned the park, 60s through 1990, he had, I guess we'll call it a family recipe, secret recipe, that really perfected that chicken. And then he brought down a friend of his by the name of Frank Sylvani to help run foods in the late 60s. And they would team up, since they were both Italians, they would team up and really do a lot of great cooking. And a lot of times I'd be working out front and they'd be in the back cooking dinner for their family. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what it is, but it smells delicious.
So you've got the mascot there right over your shoulder,
Uncle Freddy.
Uncle Freddy. So what is his history?
Uncle Freddy was developed in 1976 by the park's vice president and in charge of marketing, Bill Robinson. And matter of fact, Bill is still in the area. He's got a booth over at Trader's World and still loves talking about the park. And he helped develop the family of animals, including Uncle Freddy as the lead character. And part of it was to help celebrate the bicentennial. And then part of it also was when they changed the name of the park the following year to Americana. So Uncle Freddy is, he's just about in every advertisement of the park. So recently, um, I suggested to the board here at Monroe, I said, why don't we adopt Uncle Freddy and make him a legally registered trademark for our purposes, and we can protect his, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Not his identity, but his,
Name, image, likeness.
yeah, yeah. We didn't want Uncle Freddy to become, selling cars or something like that. So we're in the process of legally adopting him as a registered trademark.
When you walk through the park now, what do you see?
I see, it's going to sound odd, I see the park. I can go into the park and pretty much tell you where things were. And part of that is my obsession with maps and aerial photos and stuff. But part of it is it was just a really great park to be at. It was just a great atmosphere. It was well run. It was, and I'm not comparing it to Kings Island. They're apples and oranges. It's not a theme park. It's not a destination park. It was a family park and a park where you could literally leave your kids run and you wouldn't have to worry about them.
Out of all the things you collected um, from Americana, what is your favorite item?
My favorite item? I don't know if I have a favorite item. Um, and I'm not sure I really have any, if I had any odd items. It was just, if it was connected with the Swordsville and Americana, I wanted it. And there are other people out there too that do the same thing. Unfortunately, when you're competing on bidding on somebody and they want something just as bad as you do.
So were you anywhere in the area when they started the process of closing it down?
Yes, I actually had done a interview with the last owner a few weeks after he bought the park. And he took me around and was telling me what he wanted to do and what he wanted to add and the attractions he wanted to add. And it was going to be eventually a year-round operating park and all this stuff. And it sounded great. And a couple years later, 2002, um, I had started promoting the opening of the park, and he got off to a late start because he had just purchased it, and he things kind of went down from there with the company he chose to run the park. It didn't go well, and he started having issues with them and legal issues, and that's ultimately what closed up the park.
Do you think there's ever going to be a bigger museum dedicated to the park?
Well, um, the city of Monroe does have a long-range plan for the park, which is today called Monroe Bicentennial Commons Park. And things have kind of come to a standstill because they've got a flooding issue they need to resolve. And how much money you want to spend to resolve that, and is there another alternative? And they're working on all those details. But eventually, they're going to have a really premier park for the city, and maybe even the region if they get in the right attractions there.
I have a lot of people ask me this. Do you know what happened to all the fish that were in the lake?
No, I'll just leave it at that.
Um,
There were some big ones though. My gosh. I mean, they ate everything from spit to popcorn, so.
they pretty good. Um, did you watch the Life After People uh, show when they did their thing highlighting Americana?
Yeah, it was interesting. Um, a lot of what they said was true. Um, Now, did it actually happen that way? No. Um, and of course, you can't predict the future when you're trying to produce something like that. But it was interesting to go back and look at it and what they explained would happen, and it kind of did on some of the buildings. If you don't maintain them, they're going to fall apart. And unfortunately, the majority of the buildings were left unmaintained and not taken care of over the winters, and they had no choice but to tear them down. So really, the only buildings left are the administration office, which was built in 1990 after the big bathhouse fire, and the entrance to the Sky Ride is still there. And then they left all of the picnic shelters, which they want to reuse those for people using the park. Other than that, oh, and then there's a storage building in the back, which was next door to the Screechin Eagle. Other than that, unfortunately, everything else was lost.
Were there one or two fires over the course of its entirety?
There were several fires. The first big fire was a bathhouse fire, believe it or not, 1934, which, had that fire not happened, LeSourdsville Lake probably would not have become an amusement park. At that time, Edgar Streetow owned the park, and he had been using the park as a recreation area, safe place for swimming, and he was making some money on the side, and he was happy. And 1934, the bathhouse burned down, so he immediately went to the Middletown lumber company and had talked to a guy by the name of Don Daisy. And Don said, yeah, we can put together a bathhouse for you. We'll get it up and operated before the season starts. Lo and behold, Don was able to do that. Well, apparently his personality um, mixed well with Edgar's personality, and Don ended up becoming a third partner of the park. And Don was the one that kind of pushed to bring in a carousel, and later the Screechin Eagle roller coaster and other mechanical rides.
When you think about all the rides that were there, and comparing them to what you see in a lot of the still functioning amusement parks,
Hmm.
Do you think that Americana had a better collection than what you see out in the bigger parks today?
No, they didn't have anything really outstanding except for Screechin Eagle. But they pretty much would bring in rides that they knew would bring in people. So they really didn't experiment much with new rides. The only exception to that is the roller coaster that was built at Kentucky Kingdom in 1990. It was called Thunder Run. Oh, it's still there. I think they changed the name of it. Anyway, that coaster was originally designed for Americana. And they wanted to add a second coaster that kind of ran over the lake, swimming pool area, somewhere in that area. But why that project dropped, I don't know.
Do you know what happened to the train?
They had two trains. Um, and as far as I know, they were sold for scrap.
If you could go back and relive it all again, would you work there again?
Yes. However, I'd probably do things a little bit differently, but yeah.
Are there any
For,
others? Go ahead.
no, I would say for a 16-year-old, and that's your first real job. I was a newspaper carrier before that. So that was you were dealing with customers, some mad, some happy, and it really was a good training ground. And it's, these kids that work at Kings Island, they're getting so much experience. and you can't get that in school, and you can't be reading books on it. You got to actually do it.
Are there any other stories or any things that stand out over the history of it? Because you probably know it better than anybody that you would like to share.
Not that I can put in print or have on video.
Um, do you want to go into how the property was first developed before it was when it's just LeSourdsville?
Yeah. Actually, the property was started out as a lake. It's a man-made lake. Don't ask me how many acres the original lake was, but I can kind of tell you where it was. A lot of the midway was built over that original lake, and a lot of the flooding problems they have is because that lake bed is still active in most parts of that park. But it started out as a man-made lake, and they would cut ice on it. Miami Canal ran along where the railroad is, and they would cut the ice, put them on the canals, and it would go down to the shipping houses down in Cincinnati. And so once refrigeration was started, that kind of killed that. It became a cornfield. And then Edgar Streethow got the idea that around 1920 or so, he wanted to make some extra bucks, and he was looking for a place he could offer swimming. And he tried Dick's Creek, which is located adjacent to the park, and it flooded too much and was too sandy and just didn't work. So he harkened back to his childhood and remembered the Swordsville Lake. So he thought, why not rent that land? We'll get a team of horses, we'll dig that lake out and have a swimming hole. And sure enough, that's what he did. So that lasted until, like I said, until about 1934. And then they had a bathhouse fire, and that's when Don Daisy came on the scene. And Don was kind of a forward-thinking guy, and he started bringing in these mechanical rides. And within about 6 years or so, they were a full-fledged amusement park. That relationship lasted until about 1960 when Don Daisy passed away, and the bank that had made a huge loan to these guys for improvements got nervous and said, Edgar, we don't think you can run the park by yourself. We're going to recall the loan. So he had to sell the park to satisfy that loan. So along comes two concessionaires from Cedar Point. Cedar Point was in the process of buying all of their concession and rides, which previously had been operated by you and me or school teachers or whoever wanted to bring in a concession to an amusement park. It was all, for the most part, privately done by individuals. So the parks realized they could make more money if they owned all the concessions and rides. So Cedar Point started buying up these concessions. So Howard Berney and, oh God, I can't remember his partner. He was only here for a couple of years, and he left. Probably because Howard had so much determination, energy, foresight, he probably couldn't keep up with him. So any event, Howard brings in his family, helps him run the park. His parents, who had been involved in the music park industry, helped him out. His teenage son, Ron, he had another daughter, Debbie, and another daughter, Diane. They all end up helping with the park. So Berney's pretty much managed the park until 1990, when another bathhouse fire occurred. And that fire caused over $5 million damage. The park couldn't collect all of the money they thought were due, because you know insurance companies. So they were left short a couple million to operate. And so they were running really, really thin. And then they ran into a couple other side issues that really caused attendance to kind of start sliding. By the end of the year, they declared bankruptcy. So in 91, they developed a company from former management which included a couple of Berney family members. They operated the park very well, except they didn't have enough money to expand the park like they should, or bring in new rides or whatever. So in '96, Coney Island purchased the park. And a year after that purchase, the owner of the company that operated the park died. And his wife wanted no part of Americana for whatever reason. So she ordered it be put up for sale. Well, Coney was not going to sell to a competitor. So it took them several years to finally sell the park. So by 2000, Jerry Couch, who had no experience with amusement parks or food operations or anything, bought the park, had some great ideas, and then ended up opening the park in 2002 after some other issues that occurred. And he hired a company to run the park. That company had different ideas than what he did. There was a lot of friction. Long story short, that company went bankrupt, park closed abruptly, and Jerry finally decided he's lost too much money. He's not going to get it back anytime soon. He's just going to shut it down.